Crowdfunded games have become a commonplace in today's gaming landscape, with an array of popular projects from the bad, such as Mighty No. 9, the mixed with titles like Yooka-Laylee, and the upper echelon of crowdfunded games with the likes of Shovel Knight and Hollow Knight. Basically anything with Knight in the title is probably going to be good. Now you know what has been missing from the gaming landscape as of late? A new Castlevania title. It seems like we've been celebrating this series for over a year now, with the inclusion of the Belmonts and Smash Brothers, 2 collections of classic titles, and a very popular Netflix original series. With all the hype surrounding the franchise, you would think Konami would have at least one new game to take advantage of the promotion they're getting from Nintendo and Netflix. But as far as we know, nothing has been announced at this time. And as long as Konami's Konami, I'd think a couple mobile games and a Castlevania-themed pachinko machine might be all we get for the time being. Maybe there is hope, as at this year's E3 there was a new Contra game announced in the form of Contra Rogue Corps, but Konami's still got a ways to go to earn their fans' trust back. What if there was a way to source millions of dollars to create a bootlegged version of a Castlevania game without the need of Konami? Who would we even trust to make such a game? Well, no need to ask, because it already happened like 4 years ago, and it was a very successful Kickstarter campaign that raised over $5 million, so chances are you've probably already heard of it. That's right, I'm talking about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which was helmed by Castlevania veteran and Metroidvania granddaddy, Koji Igarashi. Although in a very narcissistic way, Igarashi would prefer that you refer to his games as Igavanias. These titles consist of games that Igarashi has worked on in the past, such as Symphony of the Night, 2 Game Boy Advance games, and a trilogy of Nintendo DS games. They are 2D side-scrolling action RPGs with an emphasis on exploration, where you progress using power-ups much like you would in a Metroid game. The last game in the series that Iga worked on in this style was Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, which released in 2008, which means we haven't seen a game in this style in over 11 years. Iga has stated that he wished to continue making Castlevania games in the Metroidvania style, however, Konami believed it was no longer financially viable to do so. So here we are, 11 years later, and Iga has a new studio in the form of Artplay, and is set out to make the next Castlevania game in his signature style, minus the Castlevania IP. Did he do it? Let's dive into the Nintendo Switch version to find out. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. I'm aware I'm playing, from my understanding, the vastly inferior version of the game. On PS4, Xbox One, and PC, the game runs way better with a 60 frames per second frame rate as compared to 30 frames on the Switch, and the game looks way prettier on the other platforms. The developers did release a trailer before the launch of the game that poked fun at the previous builds, where fans criticized the way Bloodstained looked, highlighting comments such as, "This game looks like poop," then showing the work that the development team has done to improve the visuals. Of course, we know now that they weren't referring to the Switch version in this trailer, as that game still looks a little bit like poop, when compared to the other versions anyway. But does this turd have legs? I'm pleased to say, yes it does. Now, I did run into the occasional game crash and some shoddy input lag, and from my understanding, every version of the game did have some launch day bugs, even some game-breaking ones, but I never experienced such a bug in my playthrough. Despite all of that, I did have a really good time with the game overall, and none of these issues really spoiled my experience with it. This is an Igavania game through and through, following the same gameplay beats as Igarashi's previous work. You explore a mammoth of a castle, fighting monsters, leveling up, defeating bosses, and gaining power-ups that allow you to backtrack through the castle. I've heard a lot of people say that this game is like a spiritual successor to Symphony, but if you're familiar with the Sorrow games, you might agree with me it plays more like them, with the shard system drawing parallels to the Sorrow title's Soul system, where Soma, the protagonist of those titles, would defeat an enemy and have a chance to absorb its soul to use magic-like abilities that have properties from the enemies that were defeated. Miriam, the protagonist in this game, does basically the same thing, but they're called shards. But this idea has been expanded upon, allowing the player to equip multiple shard types at once, giving Miriam stat buffs, and even a little companion who levels up alongside you as you play. A staple in any Igavania game would be receiving power-ups that allow you to traverse the castle as you advance through the game. Though there's no transformation abilities in her moveset, there's plenty of the same tropes as there were in previous games in Igarashi's work. See that ledge up above that you just can't reach? Well, you can probably expect to gain the ability to double jump at some point in your adventure. Does that gap just look a little too tight to squeeze into? Maybe there's a power-up that'll grant you passage. Paying homage to the inverted castle from Symphony of the Night, there's a move that allows you to flip the castle on its head with a simple button command. The castle itself is fun to explore and is one of the best I've had the pleasures of mapping out in any of Igarashi's games. It's full of secrets and Easter eggs to uncover, some even paying homage to the games that came before it. The castle is littered with portraits of Kickstarter backers, and although I didn't back the game myself, I imagine how amusing it would be to try to hunt down my own picture if I had backed the game. Also, one of the tiers would apparently allow your pets to be featured in the game, so keep an eye out for someone's demented cat or dog in your travels. Of course, there are a ton of other enemies in the game, and most of them look like reskinned Castlevania villains, featuring similar movement patterns and attacks. Despite shamelessly ripping off some of Castlevania's monsters, there's still a pretty good variety to slay as you grind to level up. There's a generous amount of save rooms that heals Miriam when used, and travel rooms that can take you back to the village area when you're running low on potions or ether. More on the hub area in a second. Worried you'll be staring at the interior of a gothic castle the entire game? Don't be. You'll be exploring a vast world created here that starts you off on a ship at sea. There's secret laboratories, a haunted train, and even a desert and ice cavern tucked away in the castle somehow. It truly is the largest world Igarashi has created from what I can tell, and for the most part, it's a blast to explore. One of the areas you'll no doubtedly be visiting the most would be the hub area, because when you're not progressing through the game, you'll want to visit the village to participate in a myriad of activities including side quests to complete, a crafting system, and an item shop to restock on potions and buy materials to craft with. The crafting system in place in this game is nothing too deep, but it does offer a good variety of items you can craft. Outside of expected armors and weapons, you can use some of the materials you've gathered in the game to make potions and even food, which gives your character a permanent stat boost, giving you the incentive to craft food as it's more than a simple recovery item. Be sure to visit Johannes the Alchemist to take advantage of this service. Side quests seem a little dull, however, and the rewards for the most part aren't worth your efforts. And the repeat boring dialogue you get from the NPCs every time you complete a quest is annoying. There's this one villager, Lindsay, who will ask you to avenge one of her loved one's death, like her husband or the town's priest, by killing X amount of enemy types. And by the time you've completed all her requests, it becomes pretty comical, honestly. Whether this is done intentionally or not, I don't know, but by the time I was avenging Lindsay's cousin's friend Martha's death, I found myself laughing out loud. Also, some of the dead villagers are clearly named after Castlevania characters, such as Dr. Simon, which is cool. Other than these bounties, the rest of the quests are fetch quests, and they're really boring. The story in this game is as engaging as any other Castlevania game, I suppose, and if you like the lore those games have built up, then this game shouldn't be any different. Miriam and this other character, Jeeble, are orphans, and they seem to be adopted by this elder alchemist named Alfred. 10 years prior to the start of the game, the two orphans and other children took place in a ritual, where crystals were fused to their bodies, making them the host of a dark alchemist curse. The only two that survived that night was Miriam and Jeeble. This puts Miriam in a coma for an entire decade until she wakes up to discover that Jeeble has become the host of many demons, and a castle has emerged. Miriam is eager to help, as she had made a promise to Jeeble that if he had ever become a danger to mankind, she would kill him. Along the way, you'll meet a large cast of characters, including a vampire named OD, who's voiced by Alucard's original voice actor from Symphony of the Night, and Zangatsu, a sword-wielding samurai voiced by Solid Snake himself, David Hayter. And there's a ton of diaries spread throughout the castle Resident Evil style to cue you in on some of the narrative that wasn't explained during the cutscenes. As in many of Iga's games, expect plenty of obvious twists near the end of your adventure. Seriously, no surprises here. Voice acting in this game is hit and miss, but not terrible. David Hayter stole the show for me, delivering lines in that raspy, smooth voice that brought Snake to life for many of us. I miss him in that role, but if Konami isn't going to use him, we might as well use him in a game that's in spite of them.
Really? You forget how many of our friends perished for similarly misplacing their faith.
This game doesn't just play like a Castlevania game, but it sounds like one as well. Just give this track a listen and tell me if it doesn't belong to a proper Castlevania sequel. beat this game around the 25-hour mark, but I played these types of games very slowly. I'm sure someone out there who doesn't get as distracted as easily as me by level grinding and exploring could beat the game in around 20 hours. I still have some post-game content to look forward to, with some secret bosses, 100%ing the map, and I'm missing some shards from my collection. If I choose, there's also a hard mode unlocked after beating the game that acts sort of like a new game plus, with most of your character's progression transferring over to your new save file. Bloodstained does feel like a fully featured game. I didn't feel ripped off for shelling out $40 for my copy of the game, as there's a ton of value already available at launch, with 13 free DLC packs promised to come out later in the future. As a huge Castlevania fan, I highly recommend this title, and with 2 great games already under the Bloodstained banner, I look forward to seeing where this series goes. For more on Metroidvanias, and even more on Nintendo, you're in the right place.